title of today's address is Always Act as if you believe that people like you. This can be fleshed out to say, if you want to like yourself and you want your life to be as happy as it can be, then act as if you believe you are liked, treating everybody as if their intentions towards you are good, as far as you possibly can. It's great advice, isn't it? But so often, it's just so very hard to do. If we are entering a new environment, doing something for the first time, or meeting new people, it can be so easy, buzzing with anxiety as we so often are, to assume defensively that all, some, or many of those people in that new environment will not like us, or will not like what we are about to say or do. And after that encounter is over, many of us then rehash the experience over and over again in our minds, searching for evidence to support our hypothesis, that is, that others do not like us and do not like what we say or do. Sometimes it's not a new experience that activates this response. The trigger can be re-entering an environment where there has previously been conflict or turmoil. Or this defensive anxiety can be the constant backdrop to our lives, lived out in our interactions with others, our preparations for these interactions, and our reflections upon these interactions. It is an exhausting and debilitating way to live. But it does have some function, at least to the prehistoric monkey brain that inhabits all our heads. It is a kind of defensive mechanism. If we take a defensive preparatory stance, then we are, to use that horrible phrase, heads up on a possible attack, either physical or psychological. And so we are ready. For to assume that the other meant us no harm would be to be left vulnerable and exposed, to be on the back foot. This, to our prehistoric ancestors, was everything. The Australian psychiatrist and co-founder of the Black Dog Institute in Sydney, Dr. Julian Short, tells us, unless you are facing physical injury or death, there is not a single human emotional problem that is not caused by either the reality or perception of loss of love, or the reality or perception of weakness, belittlement, and loss of power. There is nothing more, he says. Relationships and emotions may look much more complicated because there are variations on one or both of these themes. No human has any other emotional problems because we have only two primary needs, and they are the need for belonging and the need for territory. These needs are over 1 million years old, as are our origins, which accompany them. Baby mammals die very quickly when separated from their parents. They need love. But when our ancestors reached adulthood, they could no longer rely upon their parents. The fathers were hunting and the mothers already had a new baby to care for. For safety, our adult ancestors needed to belong to their clan, their group, or herd. If there is a tiger around, the place to be is in the middle of a group of friends. Unfortunately, to find safety in a herd, that herd has to accept you. It is not enough that you are one of their own kind. If you do not belong because in some way you fail to meet the requirements of the group, you have a problem. If you don't smell right or look right, your own kind become far more dangerous than any tiger. This is the background to our need for acceptance and our fear of rejection. But we have another primary need, the urge for our own space and territory. For our ancestors, once their acceptance by the tribe was secure, long-term survival also demanded our ancestors mark out their own territory and then be strong enough to keep out competitors. Without territorial control, no one gets to be an ancestor. Without the strength to fight and hold his own territory, a carnivore will starve. There is always too much competition for resources. During the mating season, the stakes were raised even higher. as the desire to pass on their genes prevailed. We still carry these copies of genetic programming for survival that served our ancestors for millions of years. If we appreciate this, then we are on the path to understanding the ebb and flow of our feelings and why we do what we do. We are all hungry for love, acceptance, and belonging, and rejection can still feel to us like death. Everyone wants the strength to control their own little patch, or a bigger patch if we can get away with it. Weakness, powerlessness, and losing can still threaten us profoundly by making us feel small. Remember how you felt when you first asked somebody out, or needed to speak in public. Have you ever felt the discomfort of not being able to look someone in the eye? Have you ever felt awkward with someone famous or tall or good-looking? If you haven't ever felt any of these things, then I would actually question your honesty. But have you ever had to try to make yourself feel bigger by reassuring yourself that you are just as good as the next person, or that you don't really give a damn what other people think of you? What are now emotional needs were once survival necessities. The strength of the emotion you feel if you are rejected or belittled comes from ancient programming still resident in your brain. Once upon a time, loss of love, rejection, weakness, and loss of territory all spelt death. If you can live with that logic, Dr. Short says, the next statement follows reasonably easily. Every single waking act that is not looking after your physical survival is devoted, in one way or another, to the ultimate goals of getting as much love as possible, while simultaneously getting as much of your own way as possible. In our modern world, belonging has become love, and territory has become individuality. Love is the variation on the theme of warmth, safety, and belonging through attachment to those whom you identify as your own. Your territory, or your individuality, is a bit trickier to define. It is all the material things, your house, your car, your boat, your place in a queue at the supermarket. But you also have a sense of personal territory, which is your individuality, defined by your philosophy of life, your ethics, and the things you believe to be right and good and true. Your individuality is the territory of your spirit, defining you as separate from the herd. While we go about those tasks every waking minute of getting as much love as possible, while at the same time expressing our individuality as much as possible, we find that sometimes, or quite often in fact, these goals are mutually exclusive, and that we need to choose between the two. Dr. Short suggests that in prehistoric times, when faced with this choice, it was always best to choose the former, belonging, over the latter, territory, to choose love over individuality. This was because if you weren't accepted by your tribe and were abandoned, you would almost certainly not live to claim any territory or assert your individuality. He says, while your ancestors undoubtedly wanted both, safety in the herd was probably more important to survival than was triumph over territory. When there is a tiger around, you are much better off lost in the anonymity of belonging to the herd than being proud, individualistic, and eaten. When the chips are down, pleasing people has a lot going for it. Love and belonging are ultimately better than power. It is best to place a high priority upon all our relationships and to navigate them with kindness, dignity, and gentleness. But there are times that we need to stand firm and assert, if not our territory, then our individuality. We need to do this sometimes, and we need to be assertive and not aggressive. Yet within the confines of assertiveness, we need to still exercise caution. We need to say yes as often as we possibly can. Civilized and reasonable people do not go around constantly asserting their rights. When our sense of individuality has been injured by rejection or belittlement or both, it is good to act in an assertively dignified manner. And if you can't effectively assert that individuality or reclaim territory that was rightfully yours, then immediately do something creative, Dr. Short says. because that creative part of your brain is also that part of your brain that comprises your individuality, that part that has just been assaulted. So put it to good use as soon as you can. Paint a picture, plant a tree, play the piano, write a poem, knit a jumper, cook a meal. Believe me, it works.